Hi everyone, we're going to look at how to do an independent samples t-test using SPSS and then how we would report those results in APA format. It's good for maybe college students who need to write maybe a research paper, and they typically, especially in the social sciences, need to report their results in APA format. So the way we know whether or not to use an independent samples t-test is if you plan on comparing two groups of people on some kind of dependent variable that is using continuous data. And by continuous, I mean either ratio or interval type of data. In SPSS, it typically lumps together ratio and interval data into what is known as scale data. For categorical data, that is, ordinal or nominal data. So for our example, we're going to be comparing men and women on a few different dependent variables. So let's take a look at the data we'll be using. So here we have males and we have females, and I have my data coded. If I click on this, you can see that males are indicated by 1s, and if you scroll down, females are indicated by 2s, as you can see here. And so we are going to go ahead and click Analyze, Compare Means, Independent Samples t-test. That's the one you want to select. And so for our grouping variables, we have the gender, and we'll put it into grouping variable, and we know that they are designated by 1s and 2s. It's already been filled out here. If yours are blank and your data, your two variables are indicated by a 1 or 2, you should put 1 or 2 in there. If you're using different numbers, use those numbers. All right, click OK. So the test variable is the dependent variable. This box here is where you would slide the dependent variable that you want to compare the two groups on. And SPSS is kind of nice. It lets you run several t-tests all at one time if you want to. And so any variable that has this little ruler next to it is a continuous type of variable, and you would be able to put it into that box. So for our data set, we can put in age. We also tested people on their shyness scores, and we also asked them what the likelihood is that they themselves would get a divorce in the future, if they, thinking they might or might not, between a scale of 1 and 100% chance. And then they also asked what they thought the likelihood of others around their age group would get a divorce in the future between 1 and 100. So we'll put all of them there, and that's all of the indicators that we have here that have continuous data. So that's all we can put in this box. And when you click options, this will let you, if you want to change it, it's typically set at a 95% interval change, meaning alpha level is 5%. Is at 0.5, and then you can, sometimes people want to make it more stringent and put 99% or something else. We'll just keep it as it is. And if you have a newer version of SPSS, it will let you, it will calculate, estimate effect sizes for you. Not all of the older versions of SPSS have that, but so that's kind of a neat thing that they've put in here for us. And then just click OK. And so you can see that it's comparing males and females on age, and it did a comparison for shyness, self-divorce, and others divorce, right? And it gave us the number of people that answered those questions for each group, their means, standard deviations, and standard error of the mean. And here is our independent samples test right here, the next box. And then it shows effect sizes down here. Cohen's d is the effect size used to test for t-test. And if you recall, effect size measures the strength of a relationship, how strong or weak it may be. Okay, so to find out if your independent sample's t-test is significant, we first look in the box. So if we're looking at age, for example, you first look at the Levene's test to see if you are working with equal variances between your two groups. If this is significant, or if this is non-significant, then you can continue along this row and look for the significance here. Older versions of SPSS usually only have one column for the next significance here for the t-test significance, which it automatically just tests for a two-sided t-test. But now newer versions is including a one-sided as well if you are wanting to do that. And so if this is, just to repeat, if the first significance test for Levene is not significant, you look at the significance score over here. If this was significant, you would drop down to the next one where it's equal variances not assumed. And then you would look at the significant level here, whether you're using a one-sided or a two-sided. For this example, we'll use the two-sided. And as you can see, this is not significant. So we would look here at the two-sided for age, and there's really no significance. It's not 0.05 or less. So we continue on down. This one's not significant, so keep on the top row. And this is not significant here for the t-test. Self-divorce. This is not significant because it's not 0.05 or less. So we stay on the top row and we look here. 0.89 is not significant for that either. And then we look at the final measure, and the first Levene's test is not significant. So we continue on to the two-sided t-test. And yes, we do have significance for others' divorce right here. So yay. Apparently, there's a difference between males and females in their attitudes on whether they think others would get divorced. And so to see what the difference is, you would look here at their means. So males' means were less, are lower ratings between 0 and 100 for the likelihood that others would get divorced. It's right there about in the middle, about 50% of them think so. Women, they are not so optimistic. They have about 60% chance that think that others would get a divorce. All right, so now that we know what the outcomes are, we're going to stick to looking at that significant indicator and show how to report this in APA format. And in order to do that, we need to know what the effect size is. Some versions of APA, or some versions of SPSS does calculate the standard deviation of the difference for you, and some do not. And ours does not. It actually, and this is the score here, ours shows standard error difference. So we need the standard deviation. So what we would do is calculate the standard deviation using the standard error. And to do that, you take the standard error, and we would use this formula here. So for our example, you can see, let's make this a little smaller. So we put the standard error score, which is right here, standard error of the difference, right here, for that last one, 2.943. And then we put in, these are the actual, the number of people in our, once the total number of people that are in our test. And we had 49 males and 88 women. So we would add those together. And then we would calculate for standard deviation using that formula, and it comes out to 34.44. Yay, we found standard deviation. Now, finally, we would calculate the effect size, and that is you take the two means, you find the difference of the means, the mean for the males and the mean for the females. If you recall, we mentioned that the males was around 50% and the women were around 60%, and we divide it by standard deviation, which we calculated up here. And we come out to, the Cohen's d comes out to negative 0.183. Now we're ready to report this in APA format. So we would write a sentence much like this. For your example, you can actually take this, or for your research, you can actually take this sentence and just plug in your own variables names. So if you're testing maybe a person's measure on some kind of emotional score or what have you, you would put in an independent samples t-test indicated that individuals' emotional scores were significantly higher for men and then women, and then but for us, we are testing for their likelihood that others would divorce. So we have an independent samples t-test indicated that individuals' ratings for likelihood that others would divorce in the future were significantly higher. That should say women, or it should say lower, pardon me, lower for men than for women. And it's also important that you state whether, what variable is higher and what variable is lower, especially if you're reporting for significant results. And so you take the mean for the men, which was 53.7, and their standard deviation. And so on our results, you can find that. Let's make this a little bigger here. Oh. So up here, here's their mean and then their standard deviation. So I took it for the males and the females to report my results right here and then right here. And then you take the t statistic with the degrees of freedom. That's the degrees of freedom. You can find that right here. So if you're using the top row, you would use this degrees of freedom, these degrees of freedom. If you're using the bottom row, you would use it here, right? Okay. Then you report the t statistic, which can be found here under the t, right? Depending on what row you're using. Then you put the p value, and this says 0.034. Our p value, we're using the two-sided t-test, was right here, 0.034. And then we need to plug in that Cohen's d, the effect size, for our sample. And we calculated that right up here, recall? So negative 0.183. And you would use just two places, negative 0.18. And that's how you would perform an independent samples t-test and then write the results. All right, see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.